Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Let's roll. Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. I'm Marcel, 8 years now with AWS, and I'm excited to talk today about vibe coding. This will be an AWS perspective, obviously, but I also want to share my own experience. Now, I've never been, and I'm not a professional programmer, but I always did some programming on the side. And actually, I figured I started 25 years ago with coding, basically, web development mainly. And guess what? The coolest thing we had back then to create fancy UIs was Adobe Flash. Afterwards, I became what I figured the first full-stack developer because I switched to PHP, right? Everything in one code line, no types, awesome. And over time, we got so many cool frameworks and stuff, especially in the web space, but also, of course, technology. Yet, if you look, I don't know, if you're into web development, the web is mostly powered by jQuery. Brilliant, right? We got so many new things, stuff, frameworks, but it's maybe not necessarily revolutionizing our world yet. Today, we want to talk about vibe coding and what it means to us and why I believe it's really a change. And let's try to unpack this, how it works, what it means, and how AWS might help here. You heard before in the morning and in the keynote that a software developer might only spend an hour or let's say 10, 20, 30% in actually writing code. So there are varying statistics. So you could argue, why would that matter? Why is everybody talking about a revolution if it's just probably a fraction of my day-to-day work? Turns out, and I had to face the same learning, overcome this maybe mental problem, agentic AI-assisted coding can actually help in the full life cycle of software development. We might just spend an hour of writing code, but there's more to it, right? We might explore different technologies, we do our research, we test, etc. And it turns out, and you will see that later, these tools can help you on all aspects. So I can't tell you to what degree the productivity might increase, but it's definitely more than 10% in my eyes. And I want to show you why and what you can do already today. And one thing you have always to remember, what I will be showing you and what you see out there, this is just what we have today. Every 3 to 6 months we have an evolution of models, of new capabilities. OpenAI, Anthropic, all these providers, they are working on the next generation of models. What we are using is sort of 1 year old, at least, right? And that's why I think you have to and should start thinking about those capabilities. So I don't know if you have done that research, but what is actually vibe coding? So this has actually a definition. You can look it up also on Wikipedia. Essentially, vibe coding refers to an instructed agentic AI assistant here that helps you to write code via natural language. But there's a small detail to it. You should not inspect, edit, alter any of this code, right? So the idea is, if you vibe code, you just stick on the natural language layer. And that, I would argue, might, at least today, still be a little bit difficult. But we will see later, the vision is on. So today we could argue we might want to rephrase that slightly and stick just to maybe the first part of the definition, AI-assisted coding. But again, I hope you will see at the end, this is evolving very rapidly, and who knows, maybe one day, similar to what you heard before in the keynote with the assembler story, maybe we don't really look into code anymore. Now, you might not be aware, but of course this revolution, the ability to vibe code is really enabled through agents. And while you can ask your GPT models or Anthropic models on how an app could be built and what framework and coding might be required and generating even your code, the model itself, the model alone just would not be able to provide you that full output, right? That's where agents come into play. They combine that brain, that reasoning of the model with a set of tools to complete a job. And if you ever wondered how this works behind the scenes, let me give you a quick rundown. So I mentioned the models today that we have, they can give you advice, they can return code suggestions, they can obviously take input, but it really takes additional helpers, workers, to get this all to work. So if we think about an AI assistant, a code assistant that helps you to write a new application, it needs to access your file system to maybe scan a file, to write a file. It obviously needs to interact with your model. And over time, and that's also what's happening right now, we see more and more tools, more and more capabilities coming in. It needs to or can access maybe your shell to run commands. And this is only possible, of course, through a combination of capabilities. The model is the brain, it's the orchestrator, but these agents make this really work and deliver the outcome performance that we see today. And again, what we have today is probably the worst we have ever seen. You see out there a lot of course, involvement, engagement on agents, on building MCP servers. These MCP servers, these capabilities allow the model to do all kinds of tasks. They can interact with Jira, they can interact with Figma, whatever you want, Git, you name it. And again, we'll see that later. You have to start imagining if this all were come to work, if you had all those capabilities, how could your developer experience, your environment really change? And that's what I also want to give you an insight today, how I believe this is really changing. And obviously, if you have those tools, it can help you along the life cycle, it can help you to build a new app, it can help you to refactor existing apps, modernize apps, switching frameworks, building on existing code. If you think about it, and I did this a lot in the recent weeks, I do not see a lot of boundaries, really. And we also talk about UI later. You might argue, how does that work? And there are even smart solutions on user interface and design. But what is really changing with vibe coding and with this paradigm? In the center of gravity is the so-called specification. And I want to introduce you to what we now call spec-driven development. That's the fundamental change of vibe coding or AI-assisted coding. Maybe we are not at the point where we really do not touch the code at all yet, or we might still want to look into the code and do some adjustments, or at least try to understand. But fundamentally, and that's I believe also the vision, we all might just be working on the specification in the long term. The specification describing what we want. And a good practice is to start with a skeleton, maybe give it an idea of what the app is about, or getting, if it's an existing app, of course, to scan and try to understand what you currently have, and then refine and review and iterate over it. And make no mistake, especially today, you will face errors. Things might not deploy or work initially. And I have to say, when I tried our tooling, other tooling 6 months ago, I was just thinking, hell crap, doesn't work. Errors couldn't be resolved. I mean, it's not my code, right? It was generated. I would not like to fix it. But over those 6 months, I probably became from the biggest opponent to the biggest fan. It has really changed. And again, these are the worst models we have. You might face errors, but the model will fix it for you. And the process is to work and refine your specification. Now you might ask, what is this specification? It can have all kinds of forms in the most simplistic manner. It's a text file, a markdown file, anything that describes what you do. So what makes maybe a good specification? I took that output from one of our models. It's obviously a document that describes in plain English or your preferred language as precise as possible what you want to build. And you need to, as in real software engineering, starting maybe with a user story, become really good at describing what you want. If you have performance requirements, write it down. If you have a form that's needed to, I don't know, for signups, for servers, whatever, write down what is the field length, what is the validation rules. Everything needs to be specified. That the model can do, the brain, the AI assistant can do the job for you. And that's the important part here. So again, how this might look like is a markdown file. In my case here, in this example, I created a splitwise clone, an app that helps you split expenses amongst family or friends. And when I started with a skeleton, I very quickly found myself thinking about details and trying to describe what I really want. And turns out this small, simple application turned out into a very lengthy specification, up to me describing maybe coloring or my tech stack. And that's also how you have to imagine the new or agentic AI-assisted software development process. One way or another, the idea is that you keep and retain everything you do inside the specification. Now, there are multiple ways how you can do it. You can work and interact with the model to work on a feature, implement the feature, and afterwards tell him, update my specification, add it to my input document, or you just edit the document and let it inspect the changes and generate the code afterwards. So there are various working models, but essentially it's all about this specification. And how might this look like in future? Maybe in future, this is the center of the core of our software. Obviously, maybe split it in many files, or could later probably also be in Gyro or other systems, might not just be a plain text file like we see here, but this will serve as universal input. We might get a new model, we might get new tech capabilities, and we would always start with the specification. Maybe we have some code or skeleton boilerplates next to it, but if you look at the capabilities today, what's possible today, I really believe this could happen, that we mostly work around our specification. And mechanisms or issues we have today in software engineering still apply. If you are a consultant, you might have seen this illustration here someday. I would say we humans aren't that good in describing what we want. Or in other words, it takes a ton of time to describe perfectly what our goal, our output is, right? We use sometimes stencils or visuals to help us understand. So this all remains relevant. That's why I also believe, like Max said in the morning, I'm not afraid of that we, will see a big job cut or anything. The core skill will just be slightly different. And if you know how to master these tools, and you are or have a programmer background, it's, in my eyes, magic. You can do far more with less. And the interesting part will be, and probably the next evolution we will see, what tools or support do we get to not do the same mistakes we always had? How do we get to this specification that we can agree on with different teams and people in our company, with the customer, to not build something that's undesired? Because in fact, what I didn't tell you, if you don't specify, if you leave the tech stack open, if you don't specify the validation rule or whatever, the brain, the orchestrator, the model will just assume, right? And we should really avoid those assumptions to the best of our knowledge. If you're just looking to get started, if you're exploring, fine. But the more we approach production, you of course want to be in control. You might want to tell it which Java runtime you want to use or programming language in the first place. And of course, like I said, up to maybe validation rules, etc. It will try to do the best it can, but if it doesn't know, it doesn't know. So if you don't treat it properly, it's acting maybe as a junior developer. It will just do random stuff. But if you do your input well, the output is really remarkable and of high quality already. And what do we do in this space at AWS? So obviously we have our own portfolio around AI and generative AI, agentic AI, starting from infrastructure where you can build and train your own models. That's what Anthropic does, of course, for example, or OpenAI themselves. But also maybe specialized providers that sit on a lot of data. They want to build specialized models. That's what we see happening right now, right? There are more and more models that are really good for a specific job. That's where you can alter and fine-tune every bit of your AI stack. Then we have the mid layer, which is also very interesting for software engineers. If you want to have an agentic or AI capability in your app, if a customer wants to create a chatbot application, we saw that airline example, you need an API and tooling to build your application. That's where Bedrock, our Bedrock family, comes in, access to Amazon-owned models, but also third-party models, Anthropic, Meta, and others. So we also think that the right model for the job is what you need and what you want, and we give it to you in one API. And just recently, we also announced Agent Core. If you want to build or simply run your own agents, we want to take over all the heavy lifting for you, and Agent Core is our central place for running and operating agents on AWS. Now, today, I want to highlight our ready-to-use off-the-shelf code assistants. We have actually two by now under the name Cairo and Amazon Q Developer. Essentially, they both work in the same way. So what I've said and what I will show is basically independent of those tools. They are just, I would argue, slightly geared towards a different persona. Q comes as VS Code or extensions within your IDE or as a CLI version, tailored to developers that are just looking for something being integrated in their existing IDE. And if you are a terminal person, really cool to just use your Q CLI and be done with it. Both, of course, offer, as I said, same capabilities, also ways of integrating other agents, MCP servers, and we will see later abilities to completely customize the environment. So one is this VS Code extension, then being able, of course, to directly inspect your workspace, etc. And the other one is in your terminal. And the new service we recently added as well is Cairo. Cairo is more geared towards, let's say, developers or people that are new to this field, that want to also get a ready-to-use environment, being able to start easily on spec-driven development comes as a predefined development environment that you just download and get started. Again, same mechanism sort of underneath how you build your application. It will help you through wizards and the energetic experience to get started. That's why it's probably more the entry level if you just want to explore, but fundamentally, if we talk about the output software engineering, it's very similar. Under the hood, for Q, for Cairo, we currently use Sonnet 4. We just, I think last week, had the latest release of version 4.5. That's the most advanced model from Anthropic. And there's also always a set of benchmarks being run to compare capabilities between models. One of those is on software engineering. And I, again, want to highlight what I said before. What we have now are probably still the worst models out there. The evolution is so high. Just 3-6 months after, you see the stats here, we are rapidly improving on various angles. Again, I personally think we are maybe not that you would operate all those tools as a non-programmer or without coding background. But I have to be fair. It's realistic to believe that this will be possible sooner or later. And each of the models that are available today, fair to say they all have their advantages and good spots, maybe weak spots. We choose Claude or Anthropic specifically because we believe it's currently leading in the software engineering domain, right? But as I said before, I think this field is evolving fast and changing fast. We will see probably a lot of models, a lot of different flavors at the end of the day. And at AWS, at least our conviction is to give you the right tool for the job. And how does this potentially change the way of working if you know AWS, if you have worked with AWS, if you are at an enterprise and you look to really build, deploy applications at scale? We know over years that AWS has a clear advantage if you want to integrate through APIs, if you want to build your application through infrastructure as code, for reusability, for deploying through different environments, all services accessible at one single point. But now, if you have that in a repo, if you have that in one place, or you bring it to one place, the model, the AI agent has the option of seeing it all. It can inspect your application code as well as your infrastructure code, your database layer, your hosting, your API. All components are visible. And if you do that, obviously you can do things like running a well-architected review, understanding what have I missed. It knows it all. It knows your frameworks, your runtime, your database. Have you set up monitoring? What about security vulnerabilities? So it can really do this end-to-end assessment just with one prompt, just with one call. In my eyes, that's a game changer. So if you are able to get hands on those tools, and if you just know how to bring all your information together, this is just one example of what you can do. One line, one prompt, and directly act upon. In my case, in my application, I forgot observability, maybe high availability, etc. So I know what my risk is and I can act upon. And this, I think, will be also a very big productivity boost in the software lifecycle process. And that's why also I think if you start working, although there might be hiccups still, I'm honest, it's not perfect to this day. It's changing how we build. And to the point of it maybe not run. So if you ask it to create your application skeleton, be it a WhatsApp clone or whatever you have on your mind, it might be fair. Maybe on first try it might not deploy or might not run. Happens today. But guess what? You just copy the error message back to the model, to the assistant, and it usually in 1 or 2 iterations it will fix it for you. No questions asked. You don't need to tell it where the error happened or what exactly you did. Typically you just paste it and it fixes the error for you. And this is, in my eyes, the biggest change also when I tried it 6 months ago. Back then, it was not able to resolve his errors and you were basically stuck and lost. Today, it spots the mistakes, it fixes the mistakes, and it runs. And again, this is today. In 3 or 6 months, I'm sure we won't see those hiccups anymore. There are, of course, a lot of concepts in software engineering frameworks I told you about that we were all excited about and we probably would like to adopt in our daily life, but not always easy, right? Even with UI frameworks, not always easy. I just said most of the web is still powered by jQuery, which is super old, right? If you think about it. Same goes for test-driven development. I'm not sure if you are applying or have been applying this in your company or projects. There's now no excuse. In fact, a very good pattern that also, in this case, Anthropic suggests is really start with your test cases. And that's also good with your customer, right? We talked about the problems between humans. What do I really want? Well, in fact, ideally you write down or specify your output, your test case. And guess what? The model can also, of course, generate those test cases through agents, execute those test cases, compare good or bad. It's all at your fingertips. And by that you can enter the stage of iterating on your product, on your software through integrated testing. Now, I told you before, I have this web background, and of course we were dealing a lot with UIs and making this sort of pixel perfect and designing. You could argue, nice, this might work on back end, but what about front end? What about fancy user interface? And again, if you look and see what's happening, there is a lot of stuff in this field as well. Starting with simple concepts that you might rethink. I don't know if you know, but a lot of UI frameworks come with style guides explaining how certain components are rendered. A button always looks like that, a table always looks like that, and gives examples. Now you can work with the AI assistant model and just ask him to create a style guide for your application or suggesting a style guide, which is an HTML page rendering or showing all the components. And then again, there are different options. You can change in the file, you can prompt and say, I want a certain color palette, or I want website XYZ I found on the internet to be my baseline. All of that already working. And then it can refine and regenerate the code. What is also already working, fair, maybe not perfect, maybe It's just the beginning, passing screenshots of your target design back to the agent. Figma released an MCP server. Same concept, right? I don't know if you have worked with browser emulation or Selenium in the old days. Nowadays there are things like Playwright, so you can also execute, again, through the means of agents with the model, your integration test. You can ask him to make the screenshots. You can compare, again, what you were expecting with what the application really looks like. This is already available today. Again, maybe not perfect, but I believe this is moving so fast that in due time we actually can create nearly pixel-perfect user interfaces also through those assistants. And I mentioned before one strength of this, of AI-assisted agents, of the technology, is that you can bring and integrate all kinds of other services, Figma, other capabilities, but also simple things that you want the assistant to follow, to honor. Simple things can be, before generating any code, give me some suggestions, give me alternatives, right? That's a capability here you see in Q called rule. It's, if you will, just an additional context that you pass here at runtime, and it will always evaluate and honor. If you have certain steps to be taken, build, whatever, git, commit, again, write a rule that will be honored on every step. And if you think about it, these are just some examples, but, and I hope that you will do that afterwards, after the talk, there are barely no limits. You can bake in your own personal coding rules or standards. You can take over company-wide standards. For example, from a security perspective, I told you, if you do everything in code, infrastructure as code, application as code, everything is in the fingertips. The model can see it all. It knows problematic libraries. It knows about if you have maybe ports open in your security group, if you deploy AWS infrastructure. In my eyes, a very interesting ability to just customize what you want. And just a few other examples. Like I said before, you might prompt on features and capabilities directly, but eventually you always want to update your spec. So you can write a rule. Always update my spec after you've made a code change, or always write a changelog after you made the code change. Create an architecture diagram. So again, or today, not all models at least, or not every model can generate images necessarily directly, but we can render or draw them in as SVG or as HTML page, similar to the style guide. So that's also possible and at your fingertips. Git, of course, linting, any third-party MCP servers, Figma, you name it. So if you think about it, where are the limits? I, after those 6 months, really think, what? There's something happening. I think this is really a change. It might come slowly to us, but my message to you is, check it out. Make your own experience. These are the worst models we have today. And while it might fail and initially, or there are some hiccups, it's remarkable what's working already, and I'm thrilled to see what we can do in 3 or 6 months. And that's also my closing to you with a few call to actions, if I may, a few things to keep in mind. Check out those assistants, be it our portfolio with Cairo or Q Developer. I mean, they all come with a free tier. check out also how you can customize and tailor it to your needs. You have your own way of working, and now what I explained, how I use it, if you write your spec or your prompt, I mean, probably everybody will find a different mechanism. Maybe you do some changes in the code, the model will realize, don't worry, the agent will realize. So that's all fair, and I mean, what happens on the MCP servers, namely, or basically every vendor publishes and provides this for you. We also have just announced a certification geared towards developers on Gen AI or Agentic AI, which might be interesting for you. And yeah, just try it. Or like our CTO at Amazon, Werner Vogels, would say, go build. Thanks.
One, two. Okay, working. Thank you, Marcel. We have 3 more minutes spare, and there are several questions. So let's start with the first one for you. From your experience, which approach is better for AI coding? To define all requirements for a feature in one prompt, like a waterfall, or start building simple version and then add more requirements and constraints with more prompts?
Yeah, so I showed you my simple example. I would start small and add alongside. It doesn't matter if you do it on the prompt end or through many or one specification file, but turns out once you do, you start thinking about your application and requirements more properly. And I don't know about you, if you think about a form, are you already or by default thinking about the validation rules and whatnot? Yeah. Typically you were given a user story and a few details, right? So I think in real life, it's an iterative process, and I would do the same here. So always start small, and that's, I believe, also a little bit what the agent will do. It also, from a UI perspective, it starts with something simplistic maybe, but it helps you to hopefully create the MVP that you're looking for if you do it well.
Perfect, thank you very much. Then the next question, is the Agentic Core available in Central Europe?
Yeah, Bedrock Agent Core, honestly, I don't know by heart. It just got GA, but I'm optimistic that it's already in at least Ireland and probably also Frankfurt. So I would look it up or ask my AI assistant to check. But I currently don't know at my bottom of my head.
No problem.
So it should be online in the news where it's provided, but I'm pretty sure there is already a European region available.
Perfect. All right, so next question. Amazon Q CLI is 100% written in Rust. How does it compare with latest agent loops like Gemini CLI, Claude Code, OpenAI Codex?
Okay, I didn't know that it's behind the scenes written in Rust. Maybe that's true, or maybe not. But essentially, I'm not here to tell you that it's just our tools or we have the best tools in the world. We also use Claude behind the scenes. If you have heard or if you've seen with some special sauce, some stuff on top, but essentially this evolution is across different tools and models, and I think for now explore any of those. The capabilities are pretty similar. I really believe also after checking out a few that Anthropic is leading on the software engineering end, but this is, as we have seen, if we check the news, this is changing dramatically every day, right? So every of those tools typically has some cool stuff, but this is changing, and we see, I believe, also more things coming together. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm afraid our time ran out. Marcel, thank you so much for your time and energy. Hope you guys enjoyed. We will continue in the very same room in 10 minutes with Pali Sorat. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you. And I'm outside if you want to discuss. Thank you.